Begin is an American composer and musician based in New York. He is a music advisor at the Juilliard School Dance Division, and he composed the scores for dance, theater, film, concerts, installations, all performed worldwide. He is currently interested in the interaction between electronic devices and acoustic instruments. So, Jerome, I usually start by asking our guests what their journey has been and how they ended up playing the modular synthesizer. But today, I would like to address another matter first, which is why are you here with us in the first place?
Right. So you had contacted me about doing this podcast interview, and it turns out that I happened to be working in Rome this summer, and so I said, what about we do it in person? And I wanted to I was excited about coming up to see Frap tools and see the operation here, and that's why I'm here. So I'm working with a choreographer composing music for the National Dance Academy in Rome.
Yeah, which now leads me to usually what is the first question, which is, what is your musical journey and how you ended up working mostly with choreographies?
Yeah, it's been a strange journey that I didn't expect. I started playing piano when I was 5. I took lessons for a few years and then stopped taking lessons. But when I stopped taking lessons, I started playing all the time. So there was something about the taking of piano lessons that didn't quite sit with me, but I was really interested in making music. And I also had I had a babysitter when I was young, Tom Amin, if you're watching by any chance. And he was a pianist, and he would bring over either pop music scores or Broadway scores, and he would play, and I knew enough about reading music that I could see that what he was playing was not what was on the page. And so I asked him, like, what are you playing? And he taught me what chords were.
I see.
Right? And so, and that's all it took. From that point, I started composing music. This is probably age 10 or something. Not genius prodigy stuff, like garbage. Okay. But I was writing it down and figuring out. I was learning music theory, not knowing that I was learning music theory.
I see. And where were you based at the time?
I was in Ohio, near Cleveland, Ohio.
I see.
Yeah. And so I just kept doing music myself. I played clarinet and saxophone in the school band and the jazz band. I wrote pieces for the band. I was the drum major. I conducted. But I still wasn't thinking about music as a career. And I think maybe it's because I didn't have anybody in my life to model. And none of my band directors at the time ever said to me, do you want to do this? Are you interested? Because so I didn't know. I didn't know you could take composition lessons. I didn't know that was possible.
So until the time you were mostly self-taught.
Yeah.
Okay.
So then I go to university, at Ohio University, and I go there for audio production. This is 1990. And they had a great audio production program. This is about the time where Pro Tools 1 is out. Right, so ADAT machines are still in use. So it's that transition moving from analog to digital recording, which was great because I got to learn both, which was really nice. But while I was in school, I thought, I'm here, like maybe I should do a double major in music because my interest in music hadn't gone away at all. So I started looking at the possibilities. I auditioned for the music school. Now I hadn't taken lessons. What I should have done is just played some of my own piano compositions. But instead I tried to learn some classical pieces, played them horribly. Right? But because I was being a composition major, not a performance major, they accepted me on probation into the music school. Yeah. So then I started taking music theory classes, and I'm thinking, I know what all this is. It's just learning new names for it. So I was really enjoying it, doing well, doing terrible at piano. I didn't know how to practice. I was really struggling on that end. Fast forward a few years into school, and I need a part-time job. And on a complete fluke, I won't go into the details, but just complete chance, I hear about a job in the dance department, accompanying classes. And I was an improviser, and you needed to be able to improvise. And so I contacted the director, a guy named Andrea Gribou, who has become a lifelong friend and mentor. And he said, can you come watch class? And so I said, yeah, I'll be there the next day. I go and watch class, and he's playing this dance class with a percussionist, and they're improvising, and I was blown away. I was like, this makes sense to me. And the other thing that kind of appealed to me about dance is that I had done theater growing up, and this was a way to sort of connect my music back to the stage.
I see.
So I started playing dance classes as a part-time job, and doing a lot of work with that guy, Andre Gruber, that music director for the dance department there. And when I get out of school, I'm doing various part-time jobs, and I called a local dance studio, and their accompanist had just left the prior week. And they said, yeah, can you come tomorrow and play a class? And I said, yeah. So I did, and then that led to another thing, and led to another thing, and led to another thing, and I started playing a lot of classes. This is in the Bay Area in California at this point. And then choreographers hear me play class, and they say, do you compose? And I do compose. And this is before, this is the late 90s, so Spotify doesn't exist. It's not like, yeah, here, go check out my music. It's like, someone has to find you, right? And so they would commission a score from me, and then somebody would hear that score and commission another score, and it turned into this strange specialty in the dance field. And like I said, it made sense to me. Like, I got dance and the way that dance thinks and dance works, and the logic of it, or the illogic of it at times. And it's been a fantastic part of my musical life. It hasn't been the only part of my musical life, and I have found myself in some collaborations that I wish I wasn't involved in the end.
I see.
But it's been a really interesting journey, and then that eventually took me to Juilliard. I was commissioned to write a piece at Juilliard and for the dance department, working with a choreographer, and then they needed a substitute accompanist one day that I had rehearsal, and I stayed to play the class, and then the students and the teacher went to the director at the time and said, he needs to be playing here. And so they brought me in for the next semester, and then eventually created a position for me there. And it's been a great way to be in New York, a really inspiring way to be in New York. That's a short version.
We will eventually get to the modular stuff, but I am mostly curious about composing for or with choreographies. And I was interested in the many ways in which such a piece can take form from, of course, just for, let's focus on the musical perspective only. So I was wondering if, what kind of dialogue there is between the composer and the choreographer.
Yeah, it's always different, but it's like there's a continuum, and on one end of the continuum, the music is composed first, and then the choreographer takes the music and makes a dance to it. And then on the other end, the dance is completely done, and then a composer is brought in to write music for the dance. And you can be anywhere along that continuum. My favorite way to work is to be in the middle, where we're both starting from zero. And then it kind of shifts. Sometimes there's more music, or sometimes there's more dance. And then eventually the thing coalesces. But the first conversations that I have with a collaborator are, how long is the piece? How many performances are there? What's the budget? Because then I can start to think about instrumentation. Is there budget? Is this something I'm going to make, with just electronic music and or myself playing live? Is it going to be recorded? Do we have budget to bring in musicians? So then we can start to ask questions about orchestration. Who am I going to write the piece for? Venue. Does it need to be able to tour? So I find those practical things are really useful to start with, because it starts to eliminate some options. Yeah. Right? And then I start the compositional process. And then every choreographer works differently. Some choreographers are making a piece about something, and they want that reflected in the music. And sometimes there's text, sometimes there's singing and lyrics. Sometimes there's not, right? And sometimes it's a completely abstract work. Some choreographers have very different preferences in terms of how much of a footprint the music has in the piece, how strong of a presence the music is. Another way to think about it is how much information there is. How much information is the music contributing? Is it sitting in the background and leaving a lot of room, or is it imposing itself on the dance and pushing the dance somewhere, or a mix, right? Some choreographers, the way I often work is we will have a lot of conversations, and then I will make very short sketches, 30 seconds to a minute, just long enough and just good enough to get the idea across. If we're working with real instruments, I'll just do quick MIDI mock-ups, and I don't agonize over them. It's just enough to get the idea. So if we say, here's sample A, B, C, D, E, we can say, okay, I like A, D, and E, great. Let's get rid of B and C. If I like them, I have a whole folder of ideas that have not been used in pieces yet that I think are good, but have been cut from. But now I know, okay, now A, D, and E are in play. How could they live together? And in terms of what the choreographer is making, how could they live together? And then there are conversations about structure and the arc of the piece and where a climax hits or doesn't hit. Other theatrical elements like lighting and costumes enter it as well. I like to be in rehearsals with the dancers so that I can get a sense of what that feels like to see these people interacting. Video helps a lot, but in person is much better. Some choreographers will want a tight relationship between the music and the dance, so that that there is a direct relationship, movement to music, or music to movement. And other choreographers want that never to happen, and sometimes it's a mix. So there's those kinds of conversations too.
Mm-hmm. So there are some instances in which there is some degree of freedom and some kind of fluidity between the music and the performance and the dance performance, and this kind of freedom on both ends, which leads to, it kind of brings back the concept of you improvising for classes. Let's talk a little bit about instruments. When you started playing classes, you were playing piano, right?
I was playing piano and synthesizer.
So you already reached the synthesizer as your instrument of choice.
Yeah, when I was 13, I got a Roland Juno 106. I still have it.
Wow.
Yeah, I love it. So that was my first keyboard. I was really I wanted a keyboard so badly, and finally I was able to get one. Got it used. I think it was $400, and this was in the late 80s. Nobody wanted them anymore, right? There was that period where nobody wanted those things. But I was thrilled. I had that and an Alesis, the MMT8 gray flat sequencer that you could back up to cassette tape. Yeah. Eventually, I got a Roland MC50, a hardware sequencer. There were no laptops, and it was. I didn't have a computer. This is before those days where everybody had a computer. So I had been doing electronic music since I was a kid, and so it made a lot of sense for me to do that when I played class as well. And it was also just a lot of fun because I think at the time I was using the school had a Roland JV 1080 box, which just had a huge amount of sounds in it and a bunch of sort of percussion instrument samples from all over the world, so I could play percussion with one hand and piano with the other hand.
I see.
So I would stack them. I'd have the keyboard controller on top of the piano and play that way.
What I'm mostly curious about this dynamic of improvisation with dancers is how's the interplay like, since the player is just you?
Yeah. In a class situation?
In a class, but also in transitioning to those performances where there is some degree of freedom that we were mentioning earlier.
In a class, it's really interesting because there's a pedagogical goal, right? And it was one of the best things I've learned from playing dance classes is I learned that my rhythm sucked. I didn't know that, right? Because as a pianist, you're often playing alone, right? You're not accountable to anybody.
Yeah.
And the first time I played a class, that teacher I mentioned, he had to go take a phone call. He said, "Can you play a couple combinations?" I was like, "Sure." I'd been watching him for a while. Yeah, no problem. It was a disaster. And it's because I was following the dancers. And there were 25 dancers in the room, all working on a technical exercise, and they were depending on me for the time. So I was then trying to depend on them for the time, and now nobody's got the time, right? And I didn't understand that, like, no, I have to drive the car. So there have been many things about dance. I'd say I've learned as much about music from working with dance as by studying music. But that's a big one, right? This accountability for rhythm and tempo and defining where the pulse is. Like it's here, it's here, it's here. And where are the subdivisions and where's the breath and where's the phrase in relation to that pulse. Being able to, like I said, really drive the car and say and communicate where it is while fulfilling whatever the teacher is trying to get out of the dancers in terms of quality. In a performance situation, it's quite different because now I'm not trying to support a pedagogical goal. I am trying to create an aesthetic situation and an aesthetic dialogue in the best of situations when there's improvisation. And there's, to some degree, there's almost always some level of improvisation. It's rare that I'm playing a score that I've written or I have musicians playing a score where we're just locked into a click and we're only doing this and we're not focusing on what the dance is doing. There's always an interaction there. Sometimes no. Sometimes the music's really hard and we have to just play it.
Yeah.
But often there's a back and forth, and that's it's what makes live performance so great.
Yeah, that was what I was mostly interested in, because I sometimes feel like in Western music especially, we have somehow lost the contact with the movement of the body that follows along with music. And in some cases, with more abstract forms, that's fine. But in other cases, that's like the trial by fire to know whether your music works or not.
Yeah.
Because there are some videos of Thelonious Monk playing in quartet where he just stands up, stops playing, and just starts dancing.
Yeah.
And he says that it's just to check whether the music is working or not.
Right.
Which at first may be just a little bit silly, but then the more you think about it, the more it makes sense. Because I feel like the easiest way to tell if a rhythm resonates with you is to try to move along with it. Yeah. But we somehow I feel like we separated those two disciplines into two different, let's say, curricula almost.
Yeah.
So either you are a dancer or you are a musician.
Right.
And I sometimes felt ashamed of not being able to dance. Yeah. Well, there is, of course, dance music in the pop world, yeah. But it's more a music where everybody is dancing to their own rhythm.
Right.
So what I like about choreography is this sort of kind of discipline where you're part of a bigger thing that has to move together with a piece, and yes. the piece therefore must be holding, like driving the car, yeah. as you said, and holding yeah. everything together. And I remember that when I was taking classes of ancient Greek epic, we had to read along and try to recreate the ancient Greek meters, which follow a scheme of long and short vowels. Right. And we were struggling a little bit. And the teacher just said, it's like a dance. So you have to think about the inner rhythm of the words. Mm-hmm. And see how it blends together. And then when you really start to realize that rhythm is kind of locked in ourselves as human beings, yeah. and just pretending it's not true. It's right. just making right. everything much harder right. from a composer's point of view.
Yeah, and even music that is unmetered, doesn't have a pulse, or doesn't have a discernible pulse, right? I can still find myself reacting physically to yeah. it at times, kind of moving to it, which is, there's something about, it's such a strange relationship we have with mm-hmm. regularized sound, yeah. right? Why we have this physical relationship to it and an emotional relationship to it is so strange to me and so fascinating.
Yeah.
I've been having conversations with a friend of mine, and I said recently, I feel so lucky that I care so much about sound. Like, why do we care, right? It's like, what is it about air vibrating at certain frequencies that's hitting our ears that makes us go, I want to do that. I want to I want to experience that. Yeah. Like, why, right? I feel so lucky that I have deep relationship with air molecules hitting my eardrums, but I don't understand where that comes from, because not everybody has it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and I think that we cannot pretend that rhythm doesn't exist.
Right.
I mean, that's
Right.
the main thing, because I think that it has to do with the way we recognize patterns just out of survival instincts and so on. But and even though the music that doesn't has rhythm, like more droning kind of things, even the choice of not incorporating rhythm is a rhythmic choice.
Yes.
And
Yes.
which is fine. I like the music with irregular patterns, or trying to find, it's almost like a challenge for the composer and the listener, especially in the more experimental areas, to find rhythms where they aren't supposed to be.
Right.
But even that is a choice of using or not using some degree of rhythm. I would like to then follow along on what happened after the Juno 106,
right.
and how you approach the modular synthesizer.
Yeah. So I got the Juno 106. I had been, trying to, and the manual for the Juno 106, it's like 10 pages long. And as a 13-year-old, I was like, huh? But I think, what's a VCO? Okay, what's a VCF? I don't understand what this is. But it's a great keyboard to learn synthesis on. There aren't that many controls, and I know that this slider does this. I don't know what that means, but as a kid, but I understand that I can get this to happen.
It would be nice to map the evolution of synthesizer manuals, starting from the ARP 26 or 2500, where it was basically this full book on sound synthesis, and then you turn out to a 10-pager saying, that's the trumpet sound, that's the...
right, yeah. So then the next keyboard I got was a Roland U20, which was a PCM keyboard that had a lot of had a decent sounding piano and a decent sounding bass sound, and a lot of kind of sampley kind of sounds, which I didn't have with the Juno, so that was helpful as I was making music for different things as I was growing up. When I get to college, then in the electronic music lab there, they had a synclavier, but I wasn't allowed to use that. That was only for one grad student at the time who knew how to use it. Fair enough. But they did have a giant Moog. It was about that big and about that tall. It had a wood panel with a lot of jacks on it, quarter-inch jacks on it, and it was monophonic, but it had a delay module, so you could actually fake like there were two voices if you dialed in the delay correctly. Had a ribbon controller and a keyboard. So that was my first time patching. Let's see. Then I get out of school. Eventually, I get a computer, and I get Performer, Motu Performer, which preceded Digital Performer. It was a sequencer, right? It was only MIDI. There was no audio. And then they added 8 tracks of audio to it, and then Digital Performer was their first DAW. I was on that for a while. And in terms of synths at that point, I think the synths, I didn't start to get more synths until later on. Although I had gotten, that's not true. I had a Kurzweil, the Kurzweil K2500, which was
beautiful.
A beautiful synth. Yeah, I still have that. And that was a big jump in, things that a synthesizer. It was a sampler, it was a sequencer, it was a whole workstation, many different kinds of synthesis in it.
Did it already feature the vast synthesizer algorithm? Yeah, it was based on that.
Yeah.
Awesome.
The 2500 was basically the 88 key version of the K2000.
Yeah, I see.
And I had the XS version, which had a sampler in it. So that led to a whole level up in what I could do electronically. And then the first analog synth I had, I was on tour with the dance company, and we were in Asheville, North Carolina. And for some reason, our sound check went fast. Usually we get into a theater, and it takes us so long to dial everything in. We were done in like 40 minutes. And so we called the Moog factory and said, can we come by? And they said yes. And I took a tour through the Moog factory, and I played the Voyager, and I was like, oh. need that. So I figured out a way to take extra work and save up money to get it. And once I kind of put my mind to doing that, it wasn't that hard. That was a life changer in terms of what I was doing with electronics. Now, by that point, I was already doing a lot in the computer, though, right? Lots in the box, but in terms of getting that analog synth, that was a big step. The other thing that happened prior to that is that in 2003, a company called Jazz Mutant made a box called the Lemur. And it was a controller, a touchscreen controller, multi-touch. This predates the iPad, predates the iPhone. iPhone was 2007. This is like 2003. And you can put objects on the screen and manipulate, like knobs and faders and XY pads. And you can...
Like physical objects?
No.
Okay.
Like an iPad.
Okay,
right?
I see.
But there were no
Okay,
iPads. There were no tablets at this point.
So you can build your user interface.
Yeah, exactly. And then MIDI map them or OSC map them, connected over Ethernet. And I thought, this is interesting. Because the other thing that was happening around this time in the early 2000s is that there was a big uptick in sort of avant-garde live electronic music performances. And a good friend of mine said, you know, I know they're making music, but they could be checking their email. We used to joke like, oh, look, check out the clicking technique, like the mouse technique, right? Like I know they're doing something, but the performance reality of it was that you see somebody doing this, and you're hearing all this noise, which might be really cool noise, but I found myself really missing the feeling of watching somebody making music. I didn't feel like I was watching somebody making music, even though I was watching somebody make music. And I was also trying to figure out how to bring my electronic stuff into my composition, chamber music composition and more classical-oriented composition. Because the reason I was so hesitant was that I really love limitations when I'm writing. And if I'm writing for a string quartet, there are certain things a string quartet can do, and there are so many things a string quartet cannot do.
Yeah.
And that's really helpful.
Yeah, it kind of takes a lot of brain load out of the way. I mean, you're just...
Yeah, and it pushes your creativity.
Yeah.
Right, because you've got these limitations. I think it was Stephen Sondheim. I won't get the quote right, but it's something to the effect of, he said, ask me to write a love song and I can't do it. But if you ask me to write a love song about a woman in a red dress sitting alone at a bar, now I can do it. Right? Yeah. So there were also these sort of, Macs had come into being and people were writing Macs patches. So you'd hear somebody playing an instrument and then the Macs patch would be going like, and it was like, okay, cool. But like I don't understand what's happening compositionally.
Yeah.
It feels like a layer on top of something else.
Yeah.
And around that time in the early 2000s, laptops, 2005 maybe, laptops got powerful enough to do some live processing. And when I saw this Lemur, the controller, I thought, oh, this is a way where I can connect gesture to a change in the electronics. And if I limit the electronics to live processing an acoustic instrument, now I don't have, if I'm just bringing electronics, I have the entire library of recorded sound, any manipulation I can do to it, any sound I can synthesize. It's too much. I don't know where to start. But if I've got a violinist and I'm processing the sound of that violin and I can play it so that I can react so it feels like a duet, that was interesting to me.
Yeah.
The Lemur software now exists on the iPad.
Yeah, which is the one you wear.
Yeah, that's in my patch that I had set up. I use it all the time. I still am using that system. I've been devising these ways to perform electronics in what for me is a meaningful way that interacts with a player playing live music that I compose.
So was this search for interactions and also kind of like a display of this interaction for the audience that led you also to the modular synthesizer?
No. I was eurorack curious for a long time.
Okay.
And didn't want to take the financial plunge. I was like, I know that's a rabbit hole.
Yeah.
I have a Moog. I have a Prophet. Like, I've got other synths. I had an old Korg wave station. That's something I got in the late '90s as well, that I love. And I thought, I don't need that in my life. And then during the pandemic, I had a friend of mine who was like, oh, you really might want to check out these Moog Mother 32, the semi-modular stuff had just come out. And I found one used for a really great price. And so I picked it up. And I thought, oh, this is interesting. It's not quite what I thought. And then I was doing more research, and then I picked up a maths. And now I had more modulation sources and ways to unlock more of what the Mother 32. And I thought, oh, like the giant light bulb went off. And it was like, this is not just about composing music, it's about composing systems that produce music.
Yeah.
And it made me think about writing music. I do write compositional systems, but this is different. This is not a worked out system that will generate a predictable result every time, right? This is highly interactive systems where changing one element could change the entire system. And that was so interesting to me. The happy accident side of modular was so fun. And of course, immediately, for me, being a composer, I'm thinking, how do I make this more than experimentation? How do I make this into something that I consider a piece? And so that was early on in my modular sort of journey. That was a big concern for me.
Yeah.
I knew that I think it's fantastic to have a modular setup and experiment and just make sounds. I think that's great. But for me, I knew that I wanted to make things. I wanted to make pieces. And so I started asking myself that question: how do I do this? How do I take this and make it somewhat replicatable, or something I could do live and it may not be the exact same, but you would know it's the same piece. Or how do I make a piece that I'm not going to just do in one session?
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I see. That's the main concern, I think, for everybody who's playing modular synthesizer, because it can be like a very good instrument for sound design, a very valuable tool for having new ideas, I would say, as opposed to other instruments that are more practical to put into practice some ideas that you already have.
Yeah.
This one is like a step earlier, is like a source of inspiration and so on. But I think that the biggest challenge is to build a repertoire of forms on your instrument, which is different than any other modular systems.
Yes.
And those forms needs to be compatible to one another and assembled together to create pieces at need. So that's the probably the hardest part of the training, and the part that nobody wants to talk about,
right.
really, because one needs to know those. I mean, like a composition, as the name suggests, is just putting together things.
Yes.
But if you haven't defined those things first, you can be extremely proficient at using complex envelopes, but that's not enough. I mean,
right.
There is not like a creative building block in that. Yeah. But as you find them, for example, putting like, we will see as we cue in the patch and edit it in the video, but for example, the idea of ringing a filter is a technique in itself, but can be a form.
Yes. Yeah, and the designing of an instrument for a piece was really interesting to me as well. The first modular pieces I made were again for a choreographer, and it was during the pandemic, so it was for a dance film. And I can send you a link to that film if you want, but
Put that in the episode description.
Yeah,
maybe.
I did it all on the Mother 32 and the DFAM. Those are the only two sound sources I had.
Yeah.
And I had a couple extra modules. And I just multi-tracked things in. Like I would multi-track, I would record something in and then play that and then repatch to come up with something I could put with it. And then just record, and just long stretches of it. And then in the DAW, I would assemble the piece, which was great. But there was something, I was so curious to see if I could get the DAW out of it, right? Where I was actually building the piece completely on the modular, which is harder. I'm not sure it's a great way to work. I've enjoyed it. It's been really fun, and it's a great limitation, right? Because now you've got these modules, and it can seem like you could do anything with them, but you can't do anything with them, and that's an advantage. It was interesting when I moved from the modular work and then took it into the DAW. The fun factor dropped for me.
Yeah.
I mean, I still enjoyed working with it, and the sounds that I was working with, I could never. I mean, I could have made them in a DAW, but I never would have.
Yeah.
Right. Like I would never have stumbled upon those sounds.
That's the point. I mean, you are now able to recreate them in a DAW.
Yes.
But not to create them in the first place.
Yes. Exactly.
That's the main point. But I think that the bigger shift, like composition-wise, working with a modular synthesizer, is when you start thinking about your sounds with labels as, for example, like emotions or comparison with natural sounds. For example, when you see, okay, this is like the liquid sound, or this is a sound with tension, and this is a sound which is more joyful, as opposed to this is a ringed filter, and this is like a sample and hold modulation over a wave folder.
Right.
And then as long as you go beyond the technical aspect, which is mandatory, of course, when you're learning, but then you will start to have some ideas that you can put together and then compose, I would say.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's also, there's something about modular, about that aspect of modular. Like you had said, there, I could recreate it in a DAW, but I could never have created it. I never would have created it. It leads me to make sounds that I wouldn't find otherwise, and then try to understand the technical reason for those sounds existing, so that I can try to recreate them. And often I will do that. I will take the patch out and then try to build it right away.
Exactly.
Again.
Which also in classical composition is the same thing that happens when you start writing for different instruments than the one you play.
Yes.
And then you grow used to different musical practices. For example, having strings tuned in fifths rather than fourth leads you to some different voicings and different movements that you can then transfer to our other instrument. But I think there is this virtuous cycle of mutual enhancement that you have with different outboard and different gear.
And even in my classical writing, like I've never been one to write the musical ideas and then orchestrate it.
Yeah.
I never make a piano reduction of any of my music. It doesn't make any sense because I'm writing, the material is connected to the instrument that's playing it. It's not just a musical theme.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Yeah. And I think that this is the perfect moment to cut your patch and your patch description in. So we will take a look at that. It's very detailed and very rewarding to watch. No, that's very. That is very compelling, so let's take a look at that.
Something I want to say about that is that it's for an hour-long dance piece. So I thought it would be maybe helpful to explain sort of how this is one take on achieving that goal of creating a replicatable piece. There are micro changes, but the structure of the work is the same every performance.
Okay, so let's take a look at that and meet in half an hour.
Okay, so I thought rather than show, come up with a patch and show that in depth, it might be helpful to show the patch that I used in live performance for a piece I did recently with the Douglas Dunn Dance Company. It was an hour-long piece for violins, 2 violins, electronics, and modular synthesizer. The electronics, aside from the modular synth, are processing the sound of the violins live. This is the setup here that I used for that show. I'm not going to go through the entire hour, but I thought it might be helpful to show how I structured the piece in terms of the patch, how I used the iPad to help out. And this is a hybrid system, so I'm using the modular and I'm using Ableton Live. This is the first time I've done that, and it was really interesting and useful. Ableton in this situation is the brain, and it also hosts all the effects. So there are no effects modules here, and there are no sequencers here. There are some modules that have some sequencing functions, but I'm not using them for that. Ableton's handling all the practical things: signal routing, track muting, and enabling per section. It helps to be able to recall things, because this is an hour-long piece that needed to be replicatable, not down to the microsecond, the micro moment, but in terms of the progression of the piece needed to be replicatable. Also, the violins are playing along with it, and the violins music is scored. It looks like traditional violin music. In modular, my main sequencer is the Usta, but for this project, because of the scale, because it's an hour long, and the presence of the violins and the electronic violin processing, using Ableton as the sequencer allows me to automate more things that I don't have hands for. The way I control Ableton is with this iPad, which is running the Lemur software. In this show, this piece, I am mostly using the Lemur for levels and cueing transitions and bringing in the next scene on Ableton and things like that. I'm not doing a lot of playing the effects because I'm using the modular for that, and there are places where the modular is interacting with the violins as well. I'll talk about that as we go through. My main strategy for building this patch for such a large-scale piece was to build different sections of the piece around different modules, to keep repatching to a minimum. There are places where I am using the same module, in different sections of a piece. And for that, there are a couple things that have been really handy. One is this Maze. I don't know if you can see it up here, this Maze matrix mixer. This company doesn't exist anymore, but it's a really great matrix mixer, which is nice because it has presets. I can call up with these buttons, I can call up presets that change the routing, 4 inputs, 4 outputs. It's also CV addressable, which is kind of cool. To move through presets. But in this piece, it's completely utilitarian. It's just getting signal, in this case, from modulators to different modulation sources to different destinations. The other thing that's been a huge help is this Doepfer octal switch, which is a really great 8-channel CV addressable switch, which also allows you to chain channels to a master channel. So in this case, all of the channels are set up to respond to channel 1. So when I press one button, it reroutes 12 cables for me, which is really fantastic. Because the more repatching I have to do during a show, the more room for error, that you'll put something in the wrong place in the dark, and chaos ensues. So I think I'm just going to talk through the piece, at least through the first 3 sections, one by one, and kind of explain what's happening. So section 1 centers around the Kunze filter. It's really the only module I'm using in terms of something that makes sound. I'm ringing the filters, not through the ping inputs, but just through the regular inputs. They are all set to, I'm using the low pass. And the reason is because the band pass actually sounds amazing, but gives me too clear a tone, too much tonal information, which I didn't want in this piece. So you'll hear the sound that I'm getting. The way I started is I can trigger the section to go using the iPad, which brings up levels to where I need them. And it starts sending triggers to the Kunze randomly that we'll take a listen to. So I've got one channel here for each of the filters. I can control the level of each of the filters outputs going into Ableton. I can also control how often those random triggers occur. So if I bring this up, it increases the probability that, the rate of when we might hear a filter ping. So you can see I'm still getting some tonal information, but having it on the low pass, actually, it's a duller sound. It's not quite as clear. The band pass, like I said, sounds gorgeous, but for this piece, I found the low pass filter worked better. The other thing I do in this section is that I'll turn up the resonance to actually make the filter self-resonate, and it creates these really great pitch bending kind of sounds. So like this. Which through the delay and reverb, I really love the sound of. The delay is set to a pretty long time. I have control here about how much of the kunsa goes to the delay. And then I did record audio from the violins during the show. I'll run that through so you can hear how they sound together. The violins start out really simply. That kind of an idea. The other thing that happens in this section is I actually sustain these pitches. So I'll get the bass going to create this long pedal tone. And then through the delay, you can hear that chord kind of continuing to morph and change a little bit and eventually fade away. The violin part does get more complicated than 2 notes. I'll skip ahead a little bit so you can hear some of what happens. So, really looking at how I can use the kunsa as an instrument. There are much deeper ways to keep using the kunsa as an instrument. But when I had the violin part going, this was enough. So figuring out that point of, yes, I could keep going and there are more things I could do, and I probably will do that at some point in another piece. But for this one, this was enough, and it fit with what I wanted to set up for the dance as well, along with all the other effects. All right. So for section 2 of the piece, I start bringing the violin sound into the modular rack. I'm using that with the Morphogene and the Brenso. What's happening is that I'm routing the violin signal through the disting, which is set up on both channels here as a pitch tracker, which tracks pitch and envelope. So that the pitch is modulating the volt per octave on the Brenso, and the amplitude from each violin is affecting different parameters on the Morphogene. So the first thing that happens is there's a pizzicato loop that the violinists play, and I record that into the Morphogene. So that's already been pre-recorded into the Morphogene. I grabbed that audio from the performance. So here, to demonstrate how this works, I brought in my friend, Bowie Ma, incredible string player. And she's going to demonstrate how the violin affects the sound. So Bowie, if you could just start by playing just one sustained note for a long time and then stop. So it restarted that Morphogene loop a bunch of times. And it's about dialing in the settings correctly so that I get the right amount of glitching based on the level of input, which I can control from here, and also the CV attenuators on the Morphogene. So go ahead and play a few notes and then stop, and a few notes and then stop. So you can hear how that glitches it up. And then I can also have her start to, if you can play from loud to soft and soft to loud, just change dynamics a lot. Great. So it's tracking the amplitude and pitch of what she's playing and then affecting this. I can also have her control the very speed. So go ahead and improvise. So you can see that the Morphogene's responding to her. I'll pull that pitch out so it stabilizes again. There's another component that I'm using the Brenso for, where I'm using the distinct pitch tracker, and I'll bring the loop down for a bit, and sending that to the volt per octaves on the Brenso. So Bo, if you go ahead and play just some sustained notes changing pitch. So I can manipulate that by, go ahead and play, by changing the tuning of the oscillators. Great. As you can hear, the Brenso, or the pitch tracker on the distant can't really keep up. And I love the way that glitched out the sound and made it this texture that comes in. Great. So that's how the violin's interfacing with the modular system in this section. So you can see the whole thing gets more and more chaotic by building in all of those layers. Okay, section 3 for this piece is based on these frenetic synth arpeggios. There's 4 layers of synth arpeggios. I'll explain them a little bit after I demonstrate how the patch works. So let's get started. The violins also play along. And it moves through several chord changes. Those chord changes are stepped through in Ableton as the scenes follow one another. The other little bit of control that I have is that I can change the envelope so that it's a more sustained sound. All right, so now let me break this down and show you how it works. Okay, so the antennas control the filter cutoffs. This antenna controls cutoffs 1 and 2. This antenna controls cutoffs 3 and 4. So as I move my hand closer, both get brighter. And here, 3 and 4 get brighter. And then by controlling the amount of the CV attenuators on Kunsa, as well as I've got 2 attenuators on a quadrat that are scaling the antennas response, so that as it moves through, the section is 20 minutes long, and as it moves through, I can make the effect of the antennas more intense. So the other thing that's happening here is that as I have it set up in Ableton, that as I move my hand closer to this antenna, it changes which arpeggio goes to which of the synth voices. So I can demonstrate that. So I'll just bring the filter up, and we can hear that as I move my hand closer, so if I bring up all the filters, and move my hand closer, we can hear that here's one configuration, and then they all switch. So the arpeggio pattern rotates between the voices, and then they switch again, and again. There's one spot in the middle where I've got them all in unison. So I can find that sweet spot. And then if I turn the filters back down, and as I change chords, the patterns change. So you get the idea. I'm going to just sit it on that first chord for a while, and then explain how I've got things. That's determining which voice is playing which pitch and how I can control that and control the dynamics and the timbre with my hands. It makes for a really, really expressive way to do this. It takes a lot of dialing in the settings and then knowing which attenuators to grab as because it's always different every time you boot it up. So knowing which attenuators to grab and where to set filter cutoffs, you start to understand how to play it as an instrument, and you build up sort of a muscle memory for where things are. So looking at the modulation, there's a lot of modulation, all coming from Pam's Pro Workout. So it has a lot of random voltages or just LFOs, but they're all at very different time scales. Pam's 1 is going to the rise, the yellow rise time on Falistri, and Pam's 2 is going to the green rise on Falistri. I'll explain what that's doing in a bit. The third channel is going to, the rest go to Brenso. And I'll zero out the modulation on Brenso so that we can hear what each of them is doing to the sound. That's one of the things I love about this module is there's so many modulation inputs to it that you can really get a lot of tonal variations from subtle to extreme. So Pam's 3 is malted to the Brenso symmetry through the 3-2-1, so that I can also scale it into the Piston Honda Z slider input. More on that later. So if I turn up the modulation in Brenso, I'll just turn the other synths down for now, and bring up the wave folder. We can start to hear that modulation take effect. Here we go. It's a really slow curve, right? Pam's 4 is going to the FM index on Brenso. So if I increase that, right, it starts to, but I'm not doing it so extreme. So it just adds a little bit of grit that comes in and out. And again, these are all at different rates. The channel 5 on PAMS is controlling the pulse wave shaper. So I'll cut out the rest of the modulation, so we can hear what that's doing. Channel 6 is the pulse width modulation. And PAM7 is controlling the triangle wave shaper. So if I bring the other ones down, so the Falistri yellow unipolar out is controlling a VCA that changes the amount of modulation applied to that triangle wave shaper. So if our modulation is going, the VCA is letting more and more of it through as it opens and closes. And again, these are all at different rates. So you get a non-repeating, or at least not identifiably repeating kind of modulation cycle. The other thing that is happening, let me bring all these modulations in on the Brenso at once so we can hear what the sound is doing. Sorry, when I get close to this antenna, it changes the FSU. So we can hear how that sound is dynamically changing. And then I can put in the modulation from the antennas. The green Falistri bipolar is controlling the wave folder on the Brenso. I forgot to mention that. The other thing about Falistri is that it's in quadrature mode. So because I'm modulating the rise times, the entire envelope of Falistri keeps changing its time in the way that the yellow and the green channel, follow each other. So it's also modulating the piston Honda. Here's channel A of the piston Honda. And here's channel B of the piston Honda. Which is a dual wavetable oscillator. So here's those three voices, the piston, two sides of the piston Honda and the Brenso. The other thing that's happening is that these voices are panning inside Ableton randomly. So if you're listening on headphones or if you can hear this in stereo, you'll hear a lot of motion. Last is the bass voice, the mangrove. And something that I can mention there is that I'm using the dual cascaded frequency divider on Falistri to bring in a sub-oscillator on that, which is this fat, huge sound. We had two giant subwoofers in the theater, which was a blast to hear this through. So if I hear everything together. So using lots of modulation sources, some of which are affecting each other and some that I can control real time with my hands, which makes this feel really like playing an instrument. And I can respond to the violin lines and rather than, having it just play back, even though the notes are set, I can control which note is going to which voice and orchestrate it in real time and timbrally shape everything in real time. It's a lot of fun to do.
There are a few questions that I would like to ask you on the patch. I mean, on the technical side, I think that you covered everything pretty much in detail. I was mostly curious. I have one technical question, which is how did you work in practical with the by modulating the intensity of triggers into the ringing filters in the first part.
Right. And
you show that you are able to modulate the density, the trigger density, and I was just curious about how did you achieve that?
Yeah, that was a tricky one to figure out. So that's happening in Ableton. Mm-hmm. The triggers are coming from Ableton. And Ableton has it has LFOs that you can send out as CV, but they actually didn't go slow enough for me. So I have an LFO with another LFO that is controlling the offset of the first LFO, so I can slow it down slower than its slowest setting. And I'm using on the lemur, I'm using a MIDI controller to modulate that LFO. So that LFO. The LFO that's modulating, LFO2 that is modulating LFO1, which is generating the triggers, speeds up so that LFO1 starts to, I'm controlling the offset so that you get, I'm using basically, it's just a sawtooth LFO, and I'm modulating the time of that LFO, but then I'm modulating the offset of the time of that LFO. So by sending MIDI controls to that, I can make that LFO speed up and slow down. But I'm not making, what I'm doing is I'm changing the random LFO that's controlling the trigger LFO. I'm speeding up the random LFO. So I'm still getting random triggers that happen closer together in time or farther apart in time.
I see.
Did I explain that okay?
Yeah, that makes perfect sense.
It's a string of LFOs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
That's very, also, I think it's pretty easy to replicate in the analog domain. For
Definitely.
Those who are,
I just didn't have room in my
that's
case.
That's a very modular way of patching. I mean,
very much so. Yeah.
And the other question was, how did you handle the repatch of especially of the Kunsa filter between section 1 and section 3? Was that with the Doepfer switches?
It was with the switch. And what's great about the Kunsa is I was using different inputs, right, or different outputs. So like because of the mixer section in the Kunsa, I didn't actually have to plug any. I could have all the cables plugged in and then just switch what I was sending it to.
Yeah.
So that Kunsa is full of surprises. Like the way that you chose to integrate that mixer matrix section opens up a whole level of exploration in that filter. It's not just 4 filters.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That was the main concept, because everybody kept asking, why aren't you making a filter? Why aren't you making a filter? And we were like, well, making the filter just for the sake of having a filter with Frap tools written on it.
Right.
I would have been a bit just working for like minimum goals, We were like, let's make something meaningful and something valuable. And so instead of focusing on the filter character, which is oftentimes the main concern, we also focused on making something useful music-wise.
Yeah, it's you succeeded. I mean, I feel that way about all of your modules, and I think Eurorack is at a point where, you know, how many filters can the industry sustain? You know,
probably there is, as we are talking, a new filter has been released, probably.
So I think there's really, and I'm happy it's at this point, but I feel like Eurorack's at a point where I see companies trying to figure out a unique take on a module.
Yeah,
like
that's true.
Like why make another filter, right? There's so many filters, and there's so many great filters, right? Most of them are great.
I think that the instrument industry is following the same process of Western music, where the focus is mostly on making something new or something different or a new take than making something just nice.
Right, right, yeah.
We have some sort of obsession for innovation, for the novelty, for the unknown, but I mean, sometimes if something has already been done, but you just do it slightly better, it's probably just enough, you know.
Yeah. Or if you give it a twist, right? That lets you interact with it in a different way.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, like putting more, instead of focusing on the technological advancement, just put a bit of your personality into the product.
Yeah.
Which is some manufacturers that are more craftsmen, for example, like Chiat Lombard, or that's the first one I come up with, or also Hordek that I mentioned quite a lot. You see that circuit-wise, there's nothing new under the sun, but the personal approach, the fact that you have an instrument and you know who made it, and you can tell that human part is what I think is more valuable.
Yeah.
Choices and options.
Yeah. But yeah, the filter switching was all done with that dope fur. I'm excited to play with that switch because I got it specifically for this piece.
Really?
Yeah, because I was like, I know I want these sections, but I can't repatch that many cables. The chance of making a mistake is just too high.
Yeah.
And then I'm in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So I started looking at switches, and I found that one. And the fact that you can address each one with CV, they can go either direction, and you can group them. I think there's some really interesting patching.
So basically, you can have two inputs going into one output, or two outputs, or the other way around.
Yeah,
one input to
going
two
to two
outputs.
Yes, yeah. You can do it either way.
So you are using it with two different inputs to feed the Kunze filter. You had the triggers and the arpeggiators.
Yes.
The brainstorm.
Yes.
What's that?
Yes.
Okay, I see. That was very, very good, very nice to follow along and to see how just with careful programming, a relatively small system can be so versatile.
Yeah, it was. I mean, Ableton helps, right?
Yeah,
of
course.
Although, like I said, I said in the video, Ableton it's only acting as a sequencer, right? And the effects are housed in Ableton.
Yeah.
So I've in the case I have sound sources and modulators and utilities. And control things that will allow me to generate CV. There's the Gliss module, and then the two antennas, and then all the knobs, right? So that was I really wanted to restrict myself. I wanted to do as little as possible in Ableton.
Yeah.
Right? And it was interesting. This was the first time I'd used really a composite setup with modular and a DAW in the compositional process like this. And at first, I found myself really thinking like DAW brain.
Yeah.
Right? And I had to force myself to go, no, there has to be a reason that this piece is modular, other than modular looks really cool.
Yeah.
Right? I didn't want to make a piece that I could easily have done in a DAW. I wanted to make sure that this piece, like you said, I could recreate it in a DAW if I wanted to. It would take a lot of work on this one. But I wanted it to be a modular piece, a truly modular piece. And so I just trying to think about Ableton as a couple effects modules and a sequencer. And that's just because the sequences had to be complicated. There's so many different scenes that it's triggered because it's an hour-long piece, and it, like I said, it has to repeat. It has to be replicatable. So that was, but it was interesting to find myself, as soon as I fired up that DAW, I started thinking more traditionally, like not in a modular way. And I thought, no, this doesn't need to be a modular. Now I'm just bringing extra equipment because it looks cool.
Yeah.
And so that I really tried to think, okay, so what does that mean? What are the things that I can really take advantage of in modular to shape this composition, along with the fact that I'm writing for 2 violins.
I see, because the point is that when you start bringing in a DAW, then you tend to you start thinking that you have many more possibilities, and this can be frustrating, especially if you like constraints.
Yes.
So
yes, one thing that helped was to not let myself use the timeline.
I see.
Only session view.
I see.
So that way I was only generating short sequences. And I would, that helped a lot. And, thinking like, I don't just want to play synth lines.
Yes.
Right? So then I'm looking at what I've got in the case, and I'm thinking, what's here? What can I do? Which is, where I come up with the Kunze. And with the violins, asking myself that question, how can these things interact? How can they interact compositionally, but also like actually running sound, running the violins into the modular? And what are interesting ways that can happen? And those kinds of questions, like what makes a modular composition a modular composition?
Yeah.
And what does this group of modules offer me? What chances? What options for modulation am I missing? What jacks am I not using? And do I want to still not use them, or is there an opportunity there?
Yeah.
That kind of thing, which is why I would never make it in a DAW, because I'm not looking at a limited set of parameters and trying to push the creativity on those parameters.
And the idea of dividing the composition into 3 movements was yours, or was this inspired by the choreography?
Yeah, there are actually 4.
4.
I didn't do the last move because it involves me using the Instro Looper module and sampling in the violins and then feeding back the recordings and all this huge distortion. And my patch breakdown was long enough. It wasn't the most interesting patch either, because it was really all centered around that looper and playing the looper live. But to answer your question, that was the choreographer's structure. He came to me with that structure, that the piece was going to be in 4 sections.
4 sections.
And in between each section, there's a wonderful, quite famous poet named Anne Waldman, and she did poetry in between each section. So that sort of structure was handed to me at the outset. So I knew it was going to be that many sections. And that's why I thought, okay, let me figure out which modules, let me base each section around a certain module or group of modules. And that was a practical concern because of, again, repatching and not wanting to do a ton of repatching. But it also put a great limitation on.
Yeah.
Because now I'm not looking at all the modules, I'm looking at 3 of them for this first section.
Yeah.
And how much can I get out of that? And you and I were talking earlier about a bunch of music stuff, and apropos to that conversation, there were times where I would think, okay, what else can I do? And what I learned that what I was doing was already enough. Right? Like I could have done more with the Kunze, but in this compositional setting with the violins playing and those pings happening, that was enough, right? And so having that limitation also, I think, opened my brain to let enough be enough.
Yeah, especially because even when something is overused or it just has become a cliche, but if that's what it needs to be there, just use it. I mean, it's like just a pentatonic scale. I think that we are fed up with pentatonic scales in the West over the past 50 years of music. But if there is a piece where those 5 notes just fit in, then I think that it would be a pity just not to use them.
Right. Right.
I remember I was talking once with a sound designer. I think, in an artistic residency. We were working on a piece together, and the mentor said, "Can you please make some sort of a wind sound?" And there was this sound designer who said, "No, I'm not making wind sound anymore because it's too obvious." And then I said, "Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, I agree that the wind sound become a bit of a cliche, but if it fits,
it might be right.
It might be right.
It might be exactly what you need. Yeah. Yeah.
So even that's part of understanding when something is enough.
Yeah. Sometimes you need a major chord.
Yeah.
Right? Sometimes you need a triad.
Yeah. You want to try and make it even more extravagant and more complicated and so on, but then if that's enough.
Yeah, and that's something that comes into play when working with dance or theater, and especially film, if you're underscoring text especially, but there's a sort of information ratio. If you have the music and the dance, how much information is each one contributing? Sometimes if there's too much of a density of information, it can become inscrutable for the audience, which may be what you want. Right?
I see.
Maybe that's the goal.
Yeah.
Maybe that density is, but for me, I do like musical density, and I do like complex structures, but I also tend to balance them with very open, simple structures.
Yeah, working with denser structures needs to be approached with extra care, because with such a density, it's very easy that you could take any element out and the result would be the same. That's something that I don't quite like. I mean, everything, even in the most dense scenario, everything has to be there for a purpose. It's not just like it can be either there or not, and the result will be the same.
That's one of the best things I learned from working with film and video, is that you just keep taking everything. I'll build a mix, and almost every time I will make too many layers, but I just let myself do it, and then I just start pulling them out.
Yeah.
And there comes a point where I'm like, oh, okay, I only needed 2. Yeah. I made 12, but I only needed 2. 2 gets the job done. But that practice of just constantly pulling things out to see if it matters is important, I think. And it's so easy to do on a DAW. You just mute.
Yeah. I mean, it's like eyebrows. Nobody notices them until they aren't there.
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
And that's what I like about music, where everything is just has even if a little function, but it needs to be functional.
Yeah. Yeah, and you reach that point where sometimes I'm on the fence and I think, maybe it doesn't need this. And I'll pull it out and I think, I miss it. It needs to be there.
Yeah, that's the best trial to understand. I think that it could be time for our final question, which is a very, very practical one, which is, since you have few Frap Tools modules, but if you could choose the next one, the future one, the one that doesn't exist, what would it be and why?
Yeah, this is a hard question. I've watched all of these, this whole series, and people have had so many great suggestions. The thing that I love about Frap Tools is that the modules always have an extra layer of functionality. It may be simple, even the 333 and the 321, right?
Yeah.
You think, okay, just simple utility, but the way that they mix and have that extra output on so useful and can take that simple utility, and so that seems to me to be a big part of this company's design philosophy, which I really connect with. And so other people have said this as well, but I wonder, especially after doing this last piece, right, and looking for ways to control the modular live, like what other options are there to generate CV, multiple layers of CV, and that could be via a control mechanism or something that takes CV and generates more CV in a way.
Yeah.
I know there's a couple companies working on things like that now, but that was really interesting to me, is how can I do many gestures to achieve many different results. Even using those Doepfer antennas, using two of them gives me options. The two of them, and then I'm changing the amount that they can affect something as I'm going. So that helps. And using the antennas to actually change the notes, to change which arpeggio goes to which instrument, lets me orchestrate in real time. And I have the option to affect two antennas or just one. But I'm still really just looking at proximity, right? It's one gesture. And so is there some sort of thing that lets you, I don't know, move fingers around in different ways, or what is it? That to me is what's missing in eurorack, is some other way of live instrument control.
Yeah.
And I think Frap Tools would come up with something amazing. I know other people have said something similar, but that's or like I said, ways that you can generate CV and then morph the CV.
Yeah, because the main challenge is that we are now talking about an instrument interface.
Exactly.
But the instrument doesn't really exist in the same way for everybody.
Right.
So when it's about finding a way to control metal pipes being plugged,
right,
then we can think about it.
Yes.
But we are just still talking about a stick and a metal pipe.
Right.
You know?
Right.
With any oscillator, working with a user interface that could work in the same way with a sampler, with an oscillator, with a recorder, with a filter, is a bit different because the different auditive feedback that we get. So
right.
it's very hard to find something that can work, that can provide the same gestural, the same tactile feedback with so many different oral feedbacks.
Right. Yeah, I think it would have to be something. It would have to be something centered around expressive ways of generating CV, without thinking necessarily about what it's controlling. But like, what ways are there to generate CV that we have not thought of yet?
Yeah, because Alan Strange said that anything that can be measured can become a CV source.
Right. So yeah, I think that would have to be my answer. In terms of just thinking about a module, I don't know that I have enough experience to answer that question.
Yeah, I see.
I haven't come to a point where I've thought, oh, if there was only a module that does that, and not been able to find it, right? I haven't. Maybe in 5 more years I'll have a different answer, right? I'll have thought, oh, this is what I really would love. Although I thought about the suggestions that other guests have given have been great, but I think especially coming off this last piece, ways to control. Ways to generate CV, like a variety of ways to generate CV, and especially to change that CV. Right? So for instance, when I was in this piece doing the Doepfer antennas, I could go make adjustments and then come back to the antennas, or kind of do this and come back to the antennas. But what if there's a way where whatever the controller is, that I can change the way the controller responds in real time?
Yeah.
Which is, that's what somebody's doing when they're playing a violin. Right? They're changing the way the controller responds in real time with bow pressure and which string they put it on. And yeah.
That's true. Like a controller over the controller.
Yeah, like a meta controller.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's a very fascinating answer. Thank you.
Yeah, my pleasure.
And I think that we can cap it here for today's episode. Thank you, Jerome, for being with us today. I put some links in the description of the video to follow some of your
Thanks for having me.
works.
This is great.
Yeah. So thanks again for coming here, and I hope that you enjoyed this episode, and I will see you next time for the next one.